In this video, I'll be showing you how to build 30 different Minecraft wall designs. And while I show you how to build them, I also want to talk about my build process and some of my ideas behind each design. Since I created all of these walls in the new 1.21 update, I challenged myself to include at least one of the new blocks from the update in every single wall. This was a lot of fun to do, and I'd love to hear which wall design is your favorite in the comments. I already built up the first design, which was for a city-themed wall, and for this next one, I decided to go for a fenced concept. With some supports on either side, I filled in the center of the wall using fences and fence gates, and for some details, I'm just using some trapdoors and buttons, and then to tie the wall into the surrounding area, I used some grass. The third design is for a copper-themed wall. I started off by making some pillars using stripped spruce logs, and then I filled in the gaps using the brand new copper trapdoors. I love how this lets you see what's on the other side of the wall. And to add just a little bit of color to this build, I added some lilacs in front. Next up is a village-inspired wall. To make this build look a little bit more intimidating, I added some fences on top to sort of look like some spikes. And I figured since it's a village wall, it should be a little bit more reinforced, so I decided to use some of the polished tuff blocks and stairs. This next design I called Bright, but you could also probably label it under the modern theme. I created the main structure of the wall using smooth quartz, and then I tied everything together using oxidized copper trapdoors. This next wall design is built almost entirely out of the different tuff variants. The first layer I'm using bricks, the second polished, and for the walls I'm using regular tuff. And then for just a small pop of color, I added some trapdoors. For this next wall, I went for a rustic theme. A trick I used here was adding some barrels at the bottom of the pillars, just to make them look a little bit more reinforced. And I filled in the gaps with tuff walls, and for an extra detail, I put slabs above. This next wall is pretty simple, but it's one of my favorites from this video. I made use of copper bulbs in combination with azalea leaves, which I think just worked perfectly to blend everything together. I'm honestly just really satisfied with how this one came out. For this ninth wall, I went for a modern theme, and to accomplish this, I started off with some bone blocks and smooth quartz. I added some copper trapdoors in between the pillars, but I set them back a little bit so that I'd also have room to add some flowers in between the pillars as well. For this next design, I went for a gothic theme. My go-to block for this style is dark oak, so that's what I'm using here. I decided to use it in combination with polished tuff, which actually worked pretty well for the look that I was going for. I did think the build was lacking just a little bit of color though, so I added some copper trapdoors. For the 11th idea, I decided to go for a classic oak theme. I started off by creating some pillars with slabs on top, and then to make the bottom look reinforced, I'm using full blocks, but then for the rest of the wall, I decided to use actual wall blocks just to add some depth, which I think goes a long way in making the wall look more interesting. For this next design, I wanted to go for something that looked really intimidating and strong. For the base of the pillars, I went for polished andesite, and then the rest of the pillars are created using a combination of tuff and tuff bricks. And then just like the last design, I'm using walls in between the pillars just to add some depth and make the whole wall look a lot less flat. For lucky number 13, I decided to go for a wooden idea, and just like I did for one of the other designs, I'm using some barrels at the bottom of the pillars just to make them look a little bit more reinforced. And then for the actual pillars themselves, I'm using a combination of stripped spruce logs and oak logs, which work really well in combination and add some nice texture variation. For detail and depth, I added a bunch of spruce stairs, trapdoors, and slabs. And then I'm simply filling in the back of the wall using a combination of tuff bricks and blackstone bricks. For this 14th design, I wanted to go for something a little bit more welcoming and cozy. I put some polished tuff supports on either side of the wall, which I kind of imagine are holding up these pillars. And since I wanted this wall to be more welcoming, I used copper trapdoors, which work well since you can actually see through them. And for a nice pop of color, I added some red tulips at the bottom of the wall. We're already halfway through our designs with number 15. and for this one, I wanted to switch it up a little bit, so I went for a desert style. I'm using primarily smooth sandstone in combination with the tough walls. To make this one look more interesting, I used stairs and slabs to add some jogs and height variety to the wall. For number 16, I wanted to go for a classic medieval style, and for this one, since we do have access to the tough bricks, I decided why not use that instead of like stone bricks or cobblestone, which is what I would normally lean to. I created some arches in between the pillars, and I felt like this wall needed an accent color, so I decided on dark oak, so I added some trapdoors on top and filled in the back with stripped dark oak logs, and I added a few more trapdoors in front, and then I felt like in between the arches needed a bit of detail, so I added some spruce leaves with flower pots on top. For this next design, I had a fortress in mind, so I started off with some stripped spruce log pillars, and then behind, offset one block, I put some polished tuff with polished andesite slabs on top. To cap off the pillars in a fun way, and to stick to that fortress theme, I'm using upside down spruce stairs with fences on top. And then to tie everything together, I just placed a few ferns in between the pillars. I called the 18th wall Creamsicle since it's in an orange and white theme. The pillars are made out of stripped acacia logs, which work perfectly in combination with the copper trapdoors. I filled in the gaps between the pillars with smooth quartz, and on top, I added some iron trapdoors. For this next wall, I went for something pretty simple, as I built the entire wall using only tuff blocks. But to add some interest and color to the wall, I put a bunch of flowers in front, which really make the whole thing come to life. For wall number 20, I went for a dark theme. To accomplish this, I created 2 high pillars using polished deep slate and polished tuff, and then I'm filling in all of the gaps using a combination of 3 different types of walls, namely black stone, polished deep slate, and polished tuff. For wall number 21, I went for a dark oak theme, and for these pillars, I wanted to add some texture variation, so I used a combination of stripped dark oak and just the regular dark oak logs. Similar to some other walls, I'm filling in the gaps using copper trapdoors, and then for some detail, I'm adding some buttons and flowers. For wall design number 22, I came up with this really cool kind of faded, ashy looking wall. The bottom of the pillars are made using chiseled tuff, which I think work really well in combination with the acacia logs. After that colorless wall, let's go to something a little bit more cheerful with a cherry themed wall. I built the pillars using stripped cherry logs and then filled in the gaps using cobbled deep slate. For some detail, I added some walls, fences, and fence gates. For idea number 24, I went for a natural garden themed wall. In between the pillars, I added a row of coarse dirt with a row of moss blocks on top, and that way I could plant some grass on top, which creates a really cool look for this wall. I don't often build with birch, so I decided to challenge myself a little bit with this next design. I created some spikes using stairs and fences, and then filled in the gaps using polished tuff, and for a little detail, I added some stone buttons. For wall design number 26, I came up with a really fun spiked design using oak logs and pointed dripstone. I filled in the gaps using a combination of cobbled deep slate walls and tuff walls, and for a small detail, I put some jungle buttons. Idea number 27 is for a tall, pillar-themed wall. As I've done a couple of times now, I added some barrels at the bottom of the pillars to make them look more reinforced. To bulk up the wall and add some strength to the pillars, I'm using polished tuff, and I built it out a little bit so that I could add some stairs, which really add a lot of depth to this wall. I absolutely love how polished tuff and polished andesite look together, so that's what I built this entire next wall out of, but just for a little detail, I added some stone buttons, which add some nice depth. For wall number 29, I went for a colorful flower theme. The majority of the wall is built using polished tuff and andesite, since I can't get enough of these 2 blocks together. But to bring in some color, I'm using warped stairs with copper trapdoors on top and rose bushes in front of the wall. I called this final design Aztec because of this really cool texture on the side of the chiseled tuff bricks. I'm definitely gonna experiment more with this block in the future. To tie this wall together, I used spruce stairs, slabs, and buttons. I really hope you enjoyed this video and that these wall designs gave you some inspiration and ideas for your own Minecraft world. If you found them helpful, be sure to like the video and subscribe so that you don't miss my next tutorial. As always, a huge thank you to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and happy building!